So basically, I've been working this night shift at this small tech repair shop for about a year now, fixing people's busted laptops and phones. Not exactly the career my family wanted for me, but whatever. The shop is in this kind of sketchy industrial area, but the pay was decent, and I got to actually use my coding skills instead of just being another cog at my family's business. Hey everyone. Before we dive in, I have a quick favor to ask. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and ensures you never miss out on amazing videos. Alright, let's get started. Last Tuesday, I was walking home at like 2 a.m. after my shift. I know, not smart, but my car was in the shop and I couldn't afford an Uber. I usually take the main roads, but I was tired AF and decided to cut through this alley that saves like 10 minutes. Bad decision. I heard footsteps behind me, and before I could even turn around, something hard hit me in the back. I stumbled forward and saw 3 guys wearing hoodies. One of them had a metal pipe. Another had something that looked like a bat. Me. I tried to run, but one of them tackled me, and I went down hard. They started kicking me and hitting me with the pipes. I remember trying to cover my head and one of them saying something about my wallet. I must have blacked out, because next thing I knew I was in the ER with a nurse asking me questions. The damage: 3 broken ribs, fractured left arm, concussion, bruised kidney, and a face that looked like raw hamburger. My wallet, phone, and watch were gone. The hospital staff had to use my emergency contact info from when they brought me in. I had no health insurance. Another thing my family gave me crap about constantly. I knew the bills would be insane, but I literally had no choice. I asked to borrow a phone to call my mom. When she picked up, I could tell she was annoyed. I explained what happened, trying not to sound too pathetic while also making it clear this was serious. She basically just sighed like I was telling her I got a parking ticket or something. Then she hit me with it. You got your ass beat because you're a pathetic loser wandering around at 2 a.m. instead of having a real job with normal hours. That's your problem now, not mine. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I tried explaining again how bad it was, that I needed help with the hospital bills, maybe a place to stay for a few days while I recovered. That's when I heard my Uncle Douglas in the background asking who she was talking to. She told him, and he asked to be put on speaker. Don't even think about asking for hospital money. We're done throwing cash at your failures. You made your choices, James. The thing is, my uncle had literally just bought my cousin Patrick a $14,000 used Mustang for his 25th birthday the week before. So I brought that up. The response: my mom actually laughed. Because Patrick's actually worth something. You're just the family disappointment. For context, my family runs this industrial equipment supply business my grandfather started. Everyone works there. My mom handles the books, Uncle Douglas runs sales, and Patrick, the golden child, dropped out of college but immediately got handed a management position. Me? I taught myself coding, built websites since I was 14 and wanted to go into tech. When I refused to join the family business after high school, they basically cut me off. No college money, no support, nothing. I've been on my own since I was 18, working tech jobs and teaching myself programming while they treated Patrick like royalty for doing the bare minimum. I just laid there in the hospital bed in pain, realizing that my own family wouldn't help me even when I was literally beaten half to death. Something inside me just snapped. But instead of yelling, I just smiled, which hurt like hell with my busted lip, and said quietly, "You'll regret treating me like this." My mom went off. She started screaming about how ungrateful I was, how I'd never amounted to anything, how I was just trying to guilt them. Then the finale. "Pack your shit and get out of my house when you're discharged. You're not welcome anymore." I just hung up. The nurse who'd been standing nearby looked uncomfortable and asked if there was anyone else I could call. I contacted my coworker, Kyler, who agreed to let me crash on his couch for a while. 3 days later, I was discharged. Kyler picked me up and helped me get some of my stuff from my mom's house. She wasn't home, thank God, but she'd already packed most of my things in garbage bags and left them in the garage. Real classy. That night, lying on Kyler's lumpy couch with pain shooting through my ribs every time I breathed, I started thinking. My family had always treated me like garbage because I didn't fit their plan. They'd chosen Patrick as the golden child while I was the family joke, but what they didn't realize was that by pushing me away, they'd freed me from any obligation to them. They thought I was a failure because I worked at a repair shop instead of their precious family business. But what they didn't know was how much I'd learned about supply chains, inventory systems, and business operations from fixing computers for local companies. I knew exactly how outdated my family's business practices were. I knew their vulnerabilities, their weaknesses, their biggest clients. I couldn't sleep that night, not just because of the pain, but because I was planning. They wanted a failure? Fine, I'd show them what this failure could do. I pulled out Kyler's laptop and started researching their competitors, the market gaps, software solutions that could disrupt their business model. If they thought a beating and some hospital bills would break me, they had no idea what was coming. This wasn't going to be some petty revenge. This was going to be systematic, calculated. I was going to hit them where it really hurt. Their precious business, their status, their money, and I was going to make damn sure that Patrick's Mustang would be the last luxury they could afford for a very long time. I made a promise to myself that night. In 1 year, I'd be in position. In 2 years, I'd start making moves, and within 4 years, I would completely destroy everything they valued. That was 4 years ago. Today, I finally finished what I started, and now, my phone won't stop blowing up with messages from the family that threw me away. Update 1. First off, thanks for all the comments and messages on my last post. Didn't expect that many people to actually read my story, but appreciate the support. So, anyway, the first couple months after getting jumped were basically hell. Physical recovery is one thing, but trying to get back on your feet financially when you're starting with literally nothing, that's another level. My medical bills were over $20,000, which might as well have been $20 million for all I could pay it. Had to set up this payment plan that was basically going to follow me around like a prison sentence for the next decade. Kyler let me crash on his couch for longer than I expected, like almost 2 months. Dude's a real one. His apartment was tiny AF though, just a 1-bedroom with barely enough space for his stuff, let alone mine. I kept most of my things in those garbage bags my mom had packed, just sliding them under the coffee table or against the wall. Every morning, I'd wake up and have to fold the blankets and move my pillow so Kyler could actually use his living room. At night, I'd unfold everything again, rinse and repeat. The broken ribs took forever to heal and basically hurt with every breath. Couldn't even laugh without feeling like I was being stabbed. The arm was in a cast for 6 weeks. Typing one-handed is not the move when you're trying to apply for jobs online. I still remember the day Kyler came home and found me hunched over the toilet, puking from the pain meds. He just sighed and said, maybe it was time to call my family and work things out. I threw my phone at the wall, cracked the screen, stupid move, and told him I'd rather live under a bridge than crawl back to them. He didn't bring it up again. Around week 3, I started getting these texts from my mom, not asking how I was doing or anything useful, just stuff about when I was going to pick up the rest of my things from the garage because they were in the way. Then a few about how I needed to pay my portion of the phone bill if I wanted to stay on the family plan. I just blocked her number without responding. One less bill to worry about, I guess. By month 3, I was healed enough to start job hunting for real. Applied to like 50 places online. The economy was trash, and nobody wanted to hire someone whose resume had a 6-week gap and who looked like they'd just escaped a prison fight. But I kept grinding, eventually landed this entry-level position at a company that makes supply chain management software. The pay was barely above minimum wage, but whatever. It was something. And here's the crazy part. They specialized in the exact industry my family's business was in. Industrial equipment supply. What are the odds? My first couple months there were nothing special. Boring data entry stuff. Some basic coding tasks that any first-year CS student could handle. But I paid attention to everything. How their systems worked, who their clients were, the pain points in the industry. One day, I was entering data from a client survey and saw my family's business name on the list of potential acquisition targets for the company. Turns out they had been looking at buying out smaller, struggling businesses in the region. My family's company was on that list because they were losing market share to more tech-savvy competitors. I didn't say anything about knowing them, obviously, but I started doing some digging in the company database. Probably not technically allowed, but whatever. The reports showed that my family's business was struggling hard with inventory management and client retention. Their systems were all outdated, still using spreadsheets and paper invoices. In 2023, SMH. No wonder they were losing clients. I also found out that Patrick, my golden child cousin, had somehow been put in charge of their biggest client accounts despite having 0 experience or qualifications. And surprise, surprise, those accounts were all underperforming. Around month 5 at the new job, I moved out of Kyler's place and into this absolute shoebox studio apartment. The kind with a shower that's basically in the kitchen and walls so thin you can hear your neighbor breathing. But it was mine. First night there, I sat on my mattress on the floor, couldn't afford a bed frame yet, and actually cried a little. Not from sadness, but just from the relief of having my own space again. That's when I really started focusing on my plan. During the day, I'd do my regular job, but nights and weekends, I was building something else entirely. I started developing this inventory management software specifically designed to address the exact problems my family's business was having. But instead of offering it to them, I was going to use it to compete with them. My company had this internal program where employees could submit ideas for new projects. I tweaked my software a bit to make it look less targeted and submitted it. My manager actually liked it and put me on a special project team. Suddenly, I was in meetings with people way above my pay grade, explaining my ideas. One of the senior guys, Brad, took an interest in me, started mentoring me, giving me more responsibilities. I didn't tell him about my family situation, just that I had experience with the industry from previous clients at my old repair shop. Not technically a lie. Month 7 is when things really started to click. The company decided to develop my software idea for real. They put me on the development team and even gave me a small raise. But the best part? They wanted me to start meeting with potential clients to get feedback on the product. I made sure to target businesses that worked with my family's company. These were people who knew the weaknesses in my family's operation firsthand, and they were more than happy to tell me all about it. I had this meeting with an older guy who ran a construction company. Turns out he'd been dealing with my Uncle Douglas for years and was fed up with their constantly screwed up orders and delays. He spent like an hour just ranting about how Patrick had messed up his last 3 orders. I just sat there nodding, taking notes, and thinking about how perfect this all was. Around the 8-month mark since the hospital incident, I got invited to this industry conference. My company wanted me to demo our new software platform. I was nervous AF about possibly running into my family there, but Brad insisted I go since I understood the product better than anyone. The night before the conference, I was prepping my presentation when I got a notification on LinkedIn. Patrick had viewed my profile, then my uncle, then my mom, within like an hour of each other. They'd finally figured out where I was working, and based on the company info and my job title, they had to know I was developing software for their industry. Software that could either save their business or help destroy it. I didn't reach out, didn't respond to the LinkedIn notifications, just waited. Sure enough, the next morning at the conference, I was setting up my demo booth when I looked up and saw Patrick standing there across the hall at their company's sad little table. He was wearing a suit that was too big for him and looking confused as people walked past their outdated paper brochures. Our eyes met. His jaw literally dropped. I just smiled and went back to setting up my touchscreen display that was already drawing a crowd. Game on. Update 2. So that conference turned out to be a major turning point. The look on Patrick's face when he saw me, priceless. But what happened next was even better. I'd spent my booth demo showing off our new inventory management system. Patrick kept hovering nearby, pretending to be on his phone but obviously watching everything. After my 3rd demo, this big construction company owner came over and started asking detailed questions. Turns out he was one of my family's biggest clients, or at least he had been. During our conversation, he mentioned how he'd been having reliability issues with his current supplier, aka my family's business. I played dumb and asked for details. This dude went off about how they'd messed up his last 4 orders, how their outdated systems kept causing delays, and how some kid who obviously had no experience, Patrick LOL, kept promising fixes that never happened. The next day, that same construction guy signed on with us for a 6-month trial. A week later, he canceled his contract with my family's business. That was just the beginning. Fast forward about a year, so roughly 18 months after the hospital incident. Our software was doing seriously well. I'd moved from my shoebox apartment to a decent 1-bedroom place. Nothing fancy, but I had actual furniture now instead of just a mattress on the floor. My hospital debt was still there, but I'd made decent progress on it. The best part? Our company had become a legit regional competitor to my family's business. Not because of me specifically. We had a whole team of people way smarter than me, but I definitely helped point us in the right direction. My first real indication that my family was feeling the pressure came when I got a random text from my mom. This was like 16 months after she'd kicked me out. And suddenly she's messaging me like nothing happened. The text was super casual too, just asking how I was doing and saying she'd been thinking about me lately. I didn't respond. A week later, my Uncle Douglas called. I let it go to voicemail. His message was basically saying, the family missed me and wanted to clear the air. Yeah, right. I checked with one of our sales guys who had connections in the industry. Apparently, my family's business had lost 3 major clients in the past 2 months. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They were panicking. I still didn't respond, but I did start paying more attention to which of their clients might be unhappy. We had this customer feedback system where people could rate their current suppliers. I made sure to personally follow up with anyone who gave low ratings to my family's company. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was also good business. These companies were legitimately getting screwed over by my family's outdated methods. Our system was objectively better. But yeah, I definitely prioritized their clients over random ones. And well, around month 19, I got promoted to client relations manager. The raise was decent, and now I had actual authority to make decisions. I used it. I targeted their mid-sized clients first, the ones who were big enough to matter, but small enough that my family might not immediately notice they were gone. Within 2 months, we'd pulled away 5 of their regular customers. That's when Patrick tried to add me on Facebook. I declined. Then he sent me a DM anyway, saying we should grab a beer sometime and catch up, like we'd ever been close. This was the same dude who used to make fun of me for playing with computers instead of doing real work like him. Hard pass. The next attempt was more direct. My mom showed up at my apartment one evening. I have no idea how she got my address, probably through some mutual acquaintance. I was coming back from the gym, and there she was, waiting by the building entrance. She tried to hug me. I stepped back. She looked different. Older, more stressed. She started going on about how the family had been so worried, how they'd made mistakes, how they wanted to make things right. I just stood there, arms crossed, and asked if she remembered what she said to me in the hospital. She tried to brush it off, saying she'd been stressed and didn't mean it. I asked about Patrick's Mustang. That's when she got to the real point. The family business was struggling, and they could use someone with my computer skills to help modernize their systems. I actually laughed in her face, told her I was doing just fine without them. She started getting angry, saying I was being vindictive, that I was hurting the family on purpose. I just shrugged and said, Maybe they should have thought about that before telling me I was worthless while I was lying in a hospital bed. Then I walked past her into my building. Month 21 is when things got really interesting. Patrick somehow managed to completely screw up an order for their biggest remaining client, a regional hardware chain. We're talking wrong products, missed delivery dates, incorrect invoicing, a total disaster. The client was threatening to sue. I found out because the purchasing manager reached out to me directly. Apparently, my name had been coming up in industry circles as someone who knew my stuff. He wanted to know if our system could help them avoid these kinds of mistakes. I met with him the next day, showed him exactly how our system worked, how it would prevent the exact problems they were having. 2 weeks later, they signed with us. This wasn't just any client. This was like 20% of my family's remaining business walking out the door. Around this time, I ran into Kyler at a bar. We'd stayed in touch but hadn't hung out much since I moved out. He mentioned he'd seen Patrick recently. Apparently, the repo men had come for his precious Mustang. The family business was in such bad shape that they couldn't afford the payments anymore. I also heard through industry connections that my Uncle Douglas had put his lake house up for sale, the one he'd always bragged about at family gatherings, talking about how real men build wealth through hard work while side-eyeing me and my computer hobby. Month 23 brought the rumors that my family's business was considering bankruptcy. I didn't start these rumors. They were just what people were saying, but I definitely didn't correct anyone either. That's when the real desperation set in. My mom called 13 times in one day. I finally picked up on the 14th call. She was crying, saying the business my grandfather built was about to collapse, that this was his legacy, my legacy too, that I needed to help them. I just asked her one question. When I needed your help in the hospital, what did you say to me? She got quiet. Then she hung up. The next day, Uncle Douglas showed up at my workplace. The receptionist called me to say someone was asking for me in the lobby. I went down, and there he was, the man who told me I was a failure my whole life. He looked like hell, unshaven, bags under his eyes, wrinkled shirt. He started talking really fast about how they'd made mistakes, how they were willing to give me partial ownership of the family business if I'd come help them fix their systems. I just looked at him and said, so now I'm worth something. He got red in the face, started saying I was being childish, that this was bigger than some petty disagreement, that I was destroying the family out of spite. I reminded him that when I was lying in a hospital bed after getting beaten with pipes, he called me a pathetic loser who deserved it, that he said I wasn't worth helping, that the family was done throwing cash at my failures. He actually tried to grab my arm. I yanked it away and told him if he touched me again, I'd call security. He backed off but started yelling about how I'd regret this, how families should stick together, how I was making a huge mistake. I just walked back to the elevator and left him standing there. The receptionist asked if everything was okay. I said everything was perfect. That night, I checked the industry news. There was an announcement that our company was considering acquiring several smaller regional suppliers to expand our market share. I forwarded the article to our CEO with a suggestion. We should look at Foster Industrial Supply. They're struggling, and their client base would be a perfect fit for us. That was my family's business, and I just put it directly in our acquisition crosshairs. Final update. Okay, this is the final update. Thanks for all the comments and support on my previous posts. Didn't expect this many people to follow my story, TBH. So after I suggested we look into acquiring my family's business, things moved pretty quickly. Our CEO asked me to put together an analysis of their operation, strengths, weaknesses, client base, etc. I already knew most of this stuff, but I did my homework anyway, pulling reports from our database and talking to industry contacts to get the full picture. The report I submitted was completely factual, but definitely highlighted all their vulnerabilities. Their outdated systems, declining client base, cash flow problems, and most importantly, their complete failure to adapt to modern business practices. I made sure to point out that despite their issues, they still had some valuable assets and client relationships that could benefit our company. What I didn't mention was my personal connection. That probably wasn't super ethical, but whatever. They'd made their choice years ago when they left me bleeding in a hospital bed. About 3 weeks after submitting my report, I got called into a meeting with our executive team. They'd reviewed my analysis and decided to move forward with a potential acquisition, and they wanted me to lead the initial contact since I understood the industry segment so well. I tried to keep a straight face, but inside I was basically doing backflips. This was literally perfect. Our legal team drafted an initial offer, basically a lowball amount that we knew they'd reject, but it would open the door to negotiations. The offer was sent to my family's business with just our company letterhead, no names attached. 2 days later, Uncle Douglas called me. He'd figured out where the offer came from and was pissed. He started ranting about how I was trying to steal the family legacy, how I had no right, how this was all some sick revenge plot. I just let him talk until he ran out of steam, then calmly explained that this was just business. Their company was failing and ours was growing. It was simple economics. Then I hung up. The next day I got a formal email from their lawyer rejecting our offer. Fine by me. We expected that. What they didn't know was that we'd been quietly approaching their remaining clients one by one, offering better terms, better service, and our fancy new software system. By month 30, 2.5 years after the hospital incident, My family's business had lost about 60% of their clients. I'd been promoted again to regional operations director with a nice salary bump and even a small equity stake in the company. I'd moved to a better apartment, paid off most of my hospital debt, and even bought a decent car. Meanwhile, my family was in free fall. Through industry contacts, I heard they'd had to lay off half their staff. Patrick was apparently working 60-hour weeks trying to keep things afloat, but he had no idea what he was doing. My mom had gone back to working full-time at the business instead of just handling the books, and Uncle Douglas was desperately trying to secure new financing. Around month 32, I ran into a former employee of theirs at a coffee shop. We got to talking, and he told me they were 3 months behind on rent for their warehouse. They'd also stopped matching employee 401k contributions and cut everyone's health insurance. This was the same uncle who told me I was on my own for hospital bills while buying Patrick a freaking Mustang. The next big development came around month 38. Our company had continued to grow, expanding into neighboring states. I was now managing a team of 15 people and had been given responsibility for acquisition strategy. My family's business was still hanging on by a thread, but barely. That's when I found out they'd taken out a second mortgage on their house, the family home where I grew up, to try to keep the business afloat. They'd also borrowed against my grandfather's lake property. Basically, they'd put everything on the line to save a business that was fundamentally broken. In month 42, almost 3.5 years after the hospital, we made our second offer to buy them out. This time, it was even lower than the first one, reflecting their deteriorated position. I personally signed the offer letter. I wanted them to see my name on it. The response came from their lawyer again, but this time it wasn't an outright rejection. They wanted to negotiate. They were desperate. I agreed to meet with them, but insisted it happen at our company's offices. I wasn't going to give them home field advantage. On the day of the meeting, I arrived early and made sure the conference room was set up perfectly. Water bottles, notepads, the whole deal. Professional as hell. When they walked in, I barely recognized them. My mom looked like she'd aged 10 years. Uncle Douglas's confident swagger was gone, and Patrick looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. They had a tired-looking lawyer with them who was carrying a beat-up briefcase. I stood up and greeted them formally, like they were any other business associates. No hugs, no personal remarks, just straight business. The meeting went exactly as I expected. Their lawyer tried to argue for a higher valuation based on historical performance and brand reputation. Our lawyer countered with current financials and market position. It was all very civilized on the surface, but the tension in the room was insane. About halfway through, Uncle Douglas suddenly looked at me and asked if we could speak privately. I agreed, and we stepped into a side office. That's when he finally dropped the act. He basically begged me to help them out, to give them a fair price, to not destroy everything they'd built. He admitted they treated me badly, but said this was going too far, that my grandfather wouldn't want to see his company dismantled like this. I just looked at him and asked if he remembered what he said to me in the hospital. If he remembered calling me worthless while I was lying there with broken bones. If he remembered telling me my problems weren't his concern right after buying Patrick a car. He didn't have an answer. Just looked at the floor. I told him the offer on the table was final. Take it or declare bankruptcy. Then I walked back to the conference room. They took the deal. What choice did they have? The paperwork was signed the following week. Our company acquired all their assets, client contracts, and inventory for about 30 cents on the dollar of what they were worth just 3 years earlier. We didn't keep any of their employees except for 2 salespeople who had good client relationships. The day after the papers were signed, I drove by the old family business. There was already a crew taking down the sign. 45 years of Foster Industrial Supply gone just like that. I also found out they'd had to sell the family home to pay off the business debts. They'd moved into a small rental house on the other side of town. Patrick was apparently working at some big box store. Now the golden child, the one who was worth something, was stocking shelves at minimum wage. 4 years to the day after I woke up in that hospital bed, I was sitting in my office. Yeah, I have my own office now. When I got a text from my mom, it was the first time she'd contacted me directly in over a year. "We need to talk. This has gone far enough." I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, another text. "Your grandfather would be ashamed of what you've done to this family." That one actually made me laugh. My grandfather was a shrewd businessman who built something from nothing. He would have been ashamed of how they ran his company into the ground, not of me for outcompeting them. By evening, my phone was blowing up. Texts from my mom, from Uncle Douglas, even from Patrick. Voicemails, too. They were alternating between begging for help and threatening me with vague consequences. Like what? They had nothing left to threaten me with. The last message came from my mom around midnight. "I hope you're happy now. You've destroyed everything. Is this what you wanted? To see your family suffer? Was that worth it to you?" I thought about it for a long time before texting back a single word. Yes. Then I blocked all their numbers. Tonight, I'm sitting in my apartment looking at how far I've come in 4 years. From a broken kid on someone's couch to an executive with equity in a growing company, from someone they called worthless to someone who literally bought and dismantled their entire livelihood. I don't feel bad about any of it, not even a little. They made their choice that day in the hospital, and I made mine. This wasn't just revenge, this was justice.